What if the smallest act of kindness, like fixing a stranger's broken suitcase, could lead to a second chance at life, love, and healing? In a quiet, snow-covered town, a struggling single father crosses paths with a mysterious traveler. She's in a rush. He stops to help. She leaves behind a small key, and what that key unlocks will change everything he thought he knew about himself, his past, and his future. This is not just a story about repairing what's broken, it's about discovering what's been waiting to be rebuilt all along. If you enjoy heartfelt healing stories that restore your faith in people, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to support us, and make sure you don't miss the next story that might just move your heart. Now let's begin. Struggling. Single dad repaired a tourist's broken suitcase. She forgot a key that changed his life. The cold came early to Westvale that year, settling in with the kind of stubborn stillness that only small-town winters knew. Frost etched delicate lacework onto the edges of every window pane, and the grey skies hung low like a quilt stitched by grief. In a weathered wooden house just outside the town's edge, Ben Carter tightened the flannel jacket around his shoulders and stared at the old coffee pot sputtering on the stove. It wheezed like everything else in his life, worn thin but still trying. Outside, the world was wrapped in silence, the kind that reminded him how loud loneliness could be. "Dad, where's my scarf?" came a voice from the narrow hallway. Ben turned just in time to see Noah, his 8-year-old son, hop awkwardly while trying to shove his feet into boots 2 sizes too big. His cheeks were flushed from the heater's warmth, his backpack already slung over one shoulder, a paper snowflake. "Sticking out from the zipper, top drawer under the socks," Ben called, pouring 2 mismatched mugs of coffee and cocoa. One for himself, one for Noah. Just how they always started the day, a ritual as humble as it was sacred. Noah shuffled into the kitchen, the scarf now a lopsided snake around his neck. "Mr. Harper says it might snow harder later. He's bringing his sled to school." Ben smiled faintly. "Tell Mr. Harper his sled doesn't stand a chance against yours." It was a small thing, but Noah lit up. That smile, half his mother's, made the bitter coffee taste just a little sweeter. They sat for a moment in quiet, the hum of the refrigerator filling the spaces between their breaths. Ben looked at the boy across from him, growing taller every day, and felt the usual pang in his chest. He was doing his best. It just never felt like enough. Westvale wasn't the kind of town where much happened. It had 1 traffic light, 2 diners, a gas station, and more snowplows than people under 40. Ben had lived here most of his life, left once with big dreams, then came back with a baby in one arm and a heart in pieces. His garage, Noah's garage, he'd named it without hesitation, was a one-man operation. The sign out front leaned slightly to the right, like it too had grown tired over the years. He fixed pickups, lawnmowers, once even a school bus. But business was slow, always had been, and winter made everything worse. Still, he showed up, every day at dawn, because that's what a man does when he has a child depending on him. He shows up. That morning, after dropping Noah off at school, where the boy ran through the snow with his friends, laughter trailing like chimney smoke, Ben stopped at the gas station to grab a spare part for an old Chevy someone had finally decided to get running again. The clerk, Ray, eyed him with a mix of sympathy and admiration. "You're still at it, huh?" Ben nodded. "Can't let the tools rust. Might be all I've got left." "Thought about taking that offer in the city?" Ray asked. "Guy from Chicago came by last week. Said they're still looking for lead techs. Pays good. Real good." Ben didn't hesitate. "Not interested." Ray shook his head. "Man like you could do more than fix busted tailpipes and broken snowblowers." Ben gave a thin smile. "Maybe, but I've got something more important to fix first." Ray didn't ask what. He knew. Everybody in Westvale knew. They remembered Lena Carter, the girl with the sunflower laugh, gone too soon in a car crash. That didn't give Ben time to say goodbye. He'd buried more than his wife that year. He'd buried plans, ambitions, a future he no longer believed belonged to him. By noon, Ben was back at the garage, hands stained with oil, the bitter air seeping through every crack in the building. He hummed an old tune as he worked, not for joy but out of habit, something to drown out the noise of old memories. He paused once to check the mailbox, empty again, and then returned to a rusted-out sedan that hadn't moved in years. He'd started restoring it last winter, telling himself it would be a project just for him. But life got in the way, as it always did. Still, there it sat, waiting. He wiped a hand across the dusty hood, revealing a faded Ford emblem and the reflection of a man he barely recognized anymore. There were lines where there hadn't been, and a heaviness behind the eyes that used to burn with possibility. A knock on the garage door snapped him back. Ben opened it to find no one, just the wind. But on the snow-dusted windshield of the sedan, a small drawing had appeared, a stick-figure family drawn in the fog by a small finger. A dad, a boy, and a woman with long hair, arms stretched wide. Noah must have done it that morning while waiting in the car. Ben stared at it, unmoving. It wasn't the drawing that undid him, it was the thought that his son still imagined there. Family as whole, still included her, still hoped. Ben sat on the edge of the car's front bumper, head in his hands, chest tight. It had been nearly 3 years, and still grief moved through him like a second winter, unexpected, unwelcome, but always familiar. But as he wiped his face with the sleeve of his jacket, he looked at the drawing again. This time, he saw not just what was missing, but what remained. That night over dinner, Noah jabbered about snow forts and art class, his fork barely touching the green beans. Ben listened, nodding, laughing at the right parts, but something tugged inside him. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" Noah looked up, mouth full of mashed potatoes. "Mm-hmm. Are you happy?" The boy blinked, swallowed, then smiled without hesitation. "Of course, we've got each other, right?" Ben's throat tightened. Yeah, we do." He didn't sleep well that night, not because of the cold, or the creaking house, or even the overdue bills stacked on the table, but because his son was right. They did have each other. And maybe, just maybe, that was a start. The wind howled through the cracks in the siding like an old dog trying to find its way home. Ben Carter stood on a rickety ladder outside the garage, hammer in one hand, roofing nails in the other, patching a loose shingle that had threatened to take flight during the night's storm. The morning cold bit through his gloves. He ignored it. There were 100 things that needed fixing around this place, and only 2 hands to do it. The garage, Noah's garage, stood as a stubborn relic of both necessity and memory, named after the only person who still gave his life purpose. It had once belonged to Ben's father, who'd taught him how to pull apart an engine before he was old enough to shave. The building had good bones, like people used to say about men. It creaked and sighed in the wind, but it hadn't collapsed yet, neither had Ben. Inside, the smell of old oil and metal lingered like an echo. Tools hung neatly along one wall, every socket and wrench in its place. The organization wasn't for efficiency. It was how Ben coped. He couldn't control much in life, but he could control where the 12mm socket was. He glanced over to the old restoration project in the far corner of the shop, a '68 Mustang with a body pocked by rust and a windshield dusted with forgotten ambition. It had been Lena's dream. Her father used to drive one. They had talked about restoring it together once the baby got older, once life slowed down. Once life never slowed down, it just changed shape. By mid-morning, Ben was elbows deep in the undercarriage of a snow-crusted Toyota. A customer named Moline, a retired schoolteacher with 7 cats and a heavy foot, had complained about a strange thumping noise. Turned out it was a frozen pine cone jammed behind the rear brake. He chuckled to himself, shaking his head. Some days the job was thankless, others it was absurd, but every dollar helped. Heating oil was due. Noah needed new boots. The grocery list had been sitting on the fridge untouched for a week. When the bell over the front office door rang, Ben wiped his hands on a rag and ducked inside. "Thought I'd find you in here," said Rick Jennings, a childhood friend turned real estate agent. His coat was designer, his boots polished, and he looked about as out of place in a mechanic shop as a priest at a poker game. Ben nodded. "You selling garages now?" Rick grinned. "Actually, I might be. Not yours, unless you're finally ready." "Not a chance." "Thought you'd say that," Rick sighed, dropping into the cracked vinyl chair near the heater. "Still, figured I'd ask. Got a buyer from the city looking to invest in properties near the ski routes. This place may be rough, but you're on prime land." Ben shook his head. "It's not for sale, not now, not ever." Rick raised an eyebrow. "Come on, man. You could take the money, move somewhere warmer, get a fresh start. You've got skills people pay real money for. You're wasting yourself here." Ben turned away, jaw tightening. "I've got Noah, and this place puts food on the table. That's enough." Rick studied him for a moment. "You're still wearing the ring." Ben glanced at his left hand. The wedding band sat there like it always had, the gold dulled by time and grease. "Habit," he muttered. Rick didn't push. "Look, I'm not saying forget her, just maybe it's time to stop living like your life ended when hers did." Ben didn't respond. He didn't have to. Rick stood, brushing off his coat. "You know where to find me if you ever change your mind." That night, after Noah fell asleep clutching a flashlight and a book about winter constellations, Ben sat at the kitchen table, sorting through a stack of envelopes. Most were bills. Some were final notices. One was from a mechanic certification. Course he had once been accepted into years ago, back when he still believed he had time. He ran a hand through his hair, staring at the clock. 11:30. Outside, the snow had started again, blanketing the yard in a fresh coat of silence. His gaze drifted toward the garage window, where the Mustang's shadow loomed against the frost-glazed glass. He stood and pulled on his jacket, grabbing a small key from the hook by the door, the one that opened the Mustang's trunk. Inside the garage, the cold hit him like a wave. His breath fogged the air as he unlocked the trunk and lifted it open. Inside lay boxes of tools, spare parts, and a folder of design sketches Lena had drawn before she died, her handwriting looping in the margins, full of life and plans. Ben sat down on the bumper, pulling the folder into his lap. He remembered the night they brought the car home, the way Lena had grinned, barefoot in the garage, dancing to some old Springsteen song blasting from a radio. She'd looked at the car like it was a promise, a future. He'd failed to keep it. The next morning, Ben stood beside the coffee pot, bleary-eyed and silent. Noah shuffled in, dragging his feet. "You okay, Dad?" the boy asked. "Yeah," Ben said automatically, but then paused. He knelt to zip up Noah's coat, eyes searching his son's face. "Hey, do you ever wish things were different?" Noah shrugged. "Different how? Like a different house, a different place, maybe even a different life." Noah looked, thoughtful for a moment. "Sometimes, but I like our life, even if it's not big." "Why?" "Because you always show up." Ben blinked, stunned by the boy's simple truth. He looked away, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Well," he said softly, "I'll keep showing up." Noah grinned. "You're my best mechanic," Ben laughed. "That's good, because I'm not sure I'm anyone else's." As they walked to the truck, Ben felt something shift, small, almost imperceptible, but real. A thread of warmth pulled through the fabric of cold routine. Something inside him, once locked up tight, stirred. Maybe he was still here for a reason. Maybe showing up wasn't just surviving. Maybe it was the first step toward starting again. Ben had always believed there were two kinds of silence, the kind that brought peace and the kind that reminded you of everything you'd lost. The garage at night carried the second kind. The world outside was dark, the snowfall light but persistent, clinging to the windows like it wanted in. Inside the garage, a single overhead bulb cast a yellow circle of light over the corner, where the 1968 Mustang waited like a memory that never faded, just rusted. Ben stood in front of it now, arms crossed, heart heavy. He hadn't touched the car in over 6 months. Life had a way of rearranging your priorities when you were trying to keep the lights on and your kid warm. But tonight, something felt different. Maybe it was Noah's words still echoing in his head. You always show up. Or maybe it was the quiet hope in the boy's eyes that his dad was still a little bit more than just tired hands and late rent. Whatever it was, Ben reached for the tarp and peeled it back. The Mustang's once glorious frame was dulled by neglect. Dust settled like regret on every surface. The front grille sagged a little, and one of the headlights had a fine crack running through it. But the lines of the car still had a kind of grace. Lena had loved this car, not because it was fast or flashy, but because it had character. She used to say, anything built with soul deserves a second chance. Ben had believed her, once. He opened the hood and stared at the engine, untouched for months. He checked the wiring, adjusted a loose belt, then just stood there letting the silence settle around him. A piece of yellowed notebook paper peeked out from the glove box. He pulled it free, recognizing Lena's handwriting instantly. Front panel custom in forest green. Headlights should keep the original mount. No LED swaps. Don't mess with the soul, Benny. Just clean it up so it can shine again. He exhaled sharply. A laugh or a sob. It was hard to tell which. Her words felt like they had been waiting here all along, as if she'd known he'd need a push eventually. She always knew. The next morning, Ben woke before dawn. Noah was still asleep, the blanket pulled over his ears, clutching the flashlight like a talisman. Ben didn't wake him. Instead, he quietly made his way to the garage, coffee in one hand, a wrench in the other. For the next 2 hours, before the sun even rose, he worked. He didn't think about the unpaid electric bill or the half-empty fridge. He didn't think about what Rick had said about selling the place. He just thought about bolts and brackets and the hum of possibility. At 7:30, Noah padded into the garage in sock feet, yawning. "You're fixing the Mustang?" Ben wiped grease off his hands. "Figured I'd give her another look." Noah grinned. "You're bringing it back to life." Ben tousled his hair. "That's the idea." Later that day, after school drop-off, Ben sat on the garage's front steps, drinking cold coffee and flipping through a worn photo album he'd found tucked in the bottom of a box. Most of the pictures were from a different lifetime. He and Lena standing beside the car when it first arrived, the two of them laughing, covered in grease, Lena with a smudge on her cheek and both middle fingers covered in electrical tape like makeshift gloves. There was a picture of her holding Noah. As a baby, seated in the driver's seat, pretending to steer, Ben stared at that one a long time. There was something about it, the way she looked at Noah, the joy in her face, that made his chest ache. He had tried for so long to be both parents, to keep moving forward. But maybe in doing that, he'd forgotten that he was still allowed to remember, still allowed to miss her, still allowed to dream, even if the dream was different now. By the end of the week, Ben had repaired the front axle and cleaned out the engine compartment. He hadn't done that kind of work in years, but it came back to him like a language he hadn't spoken since childhood. Muscle memory and grief combined into something almost holy. He wasn't fixing the car for money. He wasn't fixing it for anyone else. He was fixing it because something inside him was tired of standing still. One evening, as the last bit of daylight faded and he cleaned his hands with a rag, Noah came into the garage carrying 2 mugs, 1 cocoa, 1 coffee, just the way his dad liked it. "Mom would like seeing you work on it again," Noah said, handing him the cup. Ben looked at his son, surprised by the quiet insight in the boy's voice. "Yeah, I think she would." Noah climbed into the passenger seat of the Mustang and looked out the windshield like he was imagining roads that didn't exist yet. "Do you miss her every day?" he asked. Ben didn't lie. "Yes, every day. Some days more than others. Me, too." They sat in silence after that, watching the snow begin to fall again, soft and slow. Ben turned to his son and smiled. "You know, when I first got this car, I thought I'd drive it across the whole country one day. No map, no plan. Just your mom and me, windows down, music loud." Noah turned to him. "You think we could still do that? Someday?" Ben looked at the dashboard, at the empty passenger seat beside him, and at the boy who somehow had his mother's eyes and his stubbornness. "Yeah," he said. "I think we could." That night, after Noah went to bed, Ben stayed in the garage a little longer. He didn't work. He just sat. The air was still, peaceful. He realized, maybe for the first time in a long while, that he was no longer just surviving. Something had shifted, something small, but strong. He wasn't sure what it meant yet, but he knew one thing. He was ready. For what? He didn't know. But for the first time since Lena's death, the idea of a future didn't feel like a betrayal. It felt like a promise. Saturday mornings in West Vale were quiet enough to hear the snow fall. The sky hung heavy with pale light, and the trees along Main Street stood bare and patient, waiting for spring like everyone else. Ben Carter adjusted the collar of his worn jacket and tapped the hood of his truck, urging it to warm up. Beside him, Noah, bundled in 3 layers and a crooked beanie, kicked at a small drift of snow with his boot. "Can we get donuts after?" Noah asked, his breath puffing white. Ben glanced down. "We'll see how generous the universe is today." Noah grinned. "That means yes, if you find exact change under the seat again." Ben chuckled. The kid wasn't wrong. Their Saturday routine included grocery runs, library stops, and occasional miracles involving lost quarters. As the truck rumbled awake, they climbed in, windows fogging almost immediately. Ben pulled onto the icy road, careful and slow. Just outside the center of town, near the old bus stop, he spotted something, or rather someone, hunched over on the side of the road near the public bench, flailing with what looked like a damaged suitcase. He eased the truck to a stop. Noah peered through the window. "Is she okay?" "I'm not sure." Ben stepped out, boots crunching on frozen gravel. The woman looked up as he approached, startled. She was in her early 30s with dark auburn hair escaping from a thick wool scarf and a long camel-colored coat now dusted in snow. One wheel of her suitcase had completely collapsed. The metal arm that should have extended for rolling had twisted at an awkward angle. "Sorry," she said quickly, with an accent. "European, maybe. Light but distinct." "I'm fine, just the wheel broke, and I'm about to miss the bus." Crouched beside the bag, examining the damage with instinctive precision. "Looks like the axle pin snapped, might have been weakened from the cold." She tilted her head, caught off guard by his knowledge. "Can you fix it?" He hesitated. "I can try. How long until your bus comes?" She checked her phone, panic creeping in. 9 minutes. Ben studied the suitcase. "Okay, pop the trunk on my truck, and I'll see what I can do." They worked quickly. Noah helped retrieve a small toolkit from the truck bed, while Ben laid the suitcase on its side like a patient in need of triage. The plastic casing was cracked, but not beyond repair. He pried it open, resecured the pin with a short bolt from his toolbox, reinforced it with a bent washer and an old zip tie. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold. The woman watched, arms crossed against the cold, eyes flicking between Ben's concentrated expression and the snow swirling around them. "You do this often?" "Fix things," Ben said without looking. Yeah, it's kind of my job. I meant for strangers. Ben gave a half smile. Sometimes the two overlap. She blinked, then laughed softly. That's a very small-town thing to say. He tightened the final screw and tested the wheel. It rolled, imperfectly but steadily. There, should get you to wherever you're going. She looked genuinely relieved. Thank you. I didn't know what I was going to do. I have a connection to catch in Burlington. Ben nodded. You've still got time. The distant rumble of the bus engine reached them. A yellow coach crested the hill, tires hissing on slush. She turned quickly and reached for her wallet. Wait, can I pay you something? Even just a tip? Ben stood and shook his head. No need. Just glad you didn't miss your ride. She hesitated, then looked him full in the face. What's your name? Ben. I'm Elena. He nodded once. Safe travels, Elena. The driver popped the luggage compartment open. Elena glanced at her suitcase, then back at Ben. Her eyes lingered longer than necessary, curious, perhaps grateful, in a way that reached deeper than politeness. Thank you again, she said. You didn't have to stop, Ben shrugged. But I did. With that, she boarded the bus. The door hissed shut. A moment later, the vehicle pulled away, its headlights swallowed by snow and distance. Back in the truck, Noah bounced slightly, in his seat. She sounded like she's from a movie. Ben laughed under his breath. Probably just from the city. New Yorkers sound like that to us. Noah leaned back. You were nice to her. She needed help. Do you think she'll come back? Ben looked out the windshield, watching the road she disappeared down. People passing through don't usually look back. The rest of the day passed in routine rhythm. They made their grocery run, found 2 quarters and a dime under the passenger seat, just enough for one donut, and watched an old VHS tape of the Iron Giant that night. But something about that morning stayed with Ben. Maybe it was the contrast. Her coat and suitcase too elegant for Westvale, her voice softer than the usual Midwestern drawl. Or maybe it was the way she'd said his name, like it had weight. He didn't think much about it until 2 days later. He was reorganizing his toolbox in the garage, trying to find a specific washer, when something small rolled across the floor with a quiet metallic clink. Ben bent down and picked it up, a key, tiny, brass, distinctive. It had a decorative filigree etched into the bow and one single word engraved in faint cursive along the shaft. Sutter. Ben stared at it, frowning. It wasn't one of his. He flipped it over. The backside had a number stamped into the metal, 314. Then he remembered the suitcase, the broken lining, the hasty repairs. He must have knocked this loose while fixing it. Elena's suitcase. She'd been in such a rush, she didn't notice. And now, this key, delicate, clearly important, had landed in the hands of a man who fixed engines and patched tires for a living. Ben held it in his palm and turned toward the window where snow still fell softly across the yard, the trees bare against a quiet grey sky. It was probably just a luggage key. Nothing more, but something in his gut said otherwise. The key sat on the workbench like a puzzle piece, without a picture to guide it. Small, polished, heavier than it looked. Its bow was scalloped with old-world elegance, and the word Sutter gleamed faintly in the overhead light. On the back, a simple stamp, 314. Ben turned it over in his calloused fingers, more than once. He'd seen plenty of keys in his life. House keys, padlock keys, locker keys. But this one, it was different, ornate, almost personal. A kind of key someone didn't just toss into a junk drawer, and it definitely didn't belong to him. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the garage ceiling where dust and cobwebs had begun to reclaim the corners. Outside, snow fell like flour from a sieve, blanketing the yard, muting every sound except the ticking of the heater behind him. He thought of Elena, her voice, her rushed departure, the quiet determination in her eyes when she tried to fix the suitcase herself, the way she'd hesitated, almost reluctant to leave, as if something had been unfinished. Now he knew why. She hadn't just left behind a suitcase with a patched wheel. She'd left something else, something important. But what? Later that evening, as Noah colored at the kitchen table and the radio crackled with the evening news, Ben made himself a second cup of coffee and sat by the window. The key rested on the sill, catching the faint amber of the porch light. "What you looking at?" Noah asked without looking up. Ben hesitated. "Found something in the garage. Might belong to that woman we met. The one with the suitcase." Noah looked up, eyes wide. "Is it treasure?" Ben chuckled. "Not exactly." He handed Noah the key. The boy turned it over, inspecting it like a tiny archaeologist. "It's fancy." "Yeah, too fancy to be for a gym locker." Noah narrowed his eyes dramatically. "Maybe it's for a secret vault, or a hidden room, or a castle." Ben raised an eyebrow. "You've been reading too many mystery books." Noah shrugged, handing the key back. "Still could be." Ben stared at the key, thoughtful. Still could be. The next morning, while Noah was at school and snowplows carved narrow lanes down Main Street, Ben walked into the Westvale Public Library. It was a modest building, red brick, single-story, but inside it held a warmth that winter couldn't quite reach. Mrs. Halley, the librarian, looked up from her desk with surprise. "Mr. Carter," she said, adjusting her glasses. "What brings you here? Finally taking me up on that book club?" Ben smiled faintly. "Not yet. I'm looking for something, or maybe someone." He pulled the key from his jacket pocket and placed it gently on the counter. She leaned in, curiosity piqued. "Now that's a lovely piece. What's it for?" "That's the thing." "I don't know. It was left behind. The name on it, Sutter ring. Any bells?" She tilted her head, considering. "There's the Sutter family estate just east of Burlington. Old money, real private. Used to be headlines years ago, especially when the patriarch passed. They've got land, foundations, museums, all sorts of things with their name on it." Ben blinked. "A family?" "Oh, yes. You don't forget the Sutter name. Generations of wealth. Rumor is they're eccentric. Some say they own an island. Others say they just disappear when they don't want to be found." Ben frowned. "Would they have something labeled 314? Mrs. Halley thought for a moment. "Sounds like a room number, maybe a safe deposit box, or a private suite." Ben left with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear now. Elena wasn't just a tourist with a broken suitcase. That night, he sat across from Noah at the dinner table, mind elsewhere, as the boy recounted a thrilling dodgeball victory. "Dad," Noah poked at his mac and cheese. "You okay?" Ben nodded slowly. "Yeah. Just thinking." "About the lady?" Ben didn't lie. "A little." Noah chewed thoughtfully. "You think she lost something important?" "I think she did." "Then we should give it back." Ben smiled at the certainty in his son's voice. "Yeah, we should." But he didn't know how. He didn't know where she'd gone, or how to find someone who, if Mrs. Halley was right, came from a world he had no map for. He stared at the key again later that night, its curves gleaming in the lamplight. It was beginning to feel heavier, like it was waiting on him to do something with it. 3 days passed. Then, just as Ben was closing the garage one afternoon, headlights swept across the snow-packed driveway. A dark sedan pulled in, sleek, silent, expensive. The kind of car that didn't belong in Westvale. Ben stepped outside, brushing his hands on his jeans. A man in a charcoal-grey coat stepped out, mid-50s, clean-shaven, eyes sharp. He approached with a kind of quiet purpose. "Are you Ben Carter?" the man asked. Ben's instincts prickled. "Who's asking?" "I'm Martin Graves," the man said, extending a gloved hand. "I represent the Sutter family." Ben froze. Martin continued. "I believe you recently came into possession of a key." Ben said nothing at first, then slowly nodded. She left it, in the suitcase. She? Martin asked carefully. Elena, Ben replied. She didn't give a last name, just said she was in a hurry. Martin's gaze sharpened. And you have the key? Ben hesitated again. Something about the man's crisp suit and the soft hum of the car engine made everything feel too controlled, too curated. Yes, he said finally. I do. Martin's shoulders relaxed. That key is important. Very important. Miss Elena has been looking for it. She was quite distressed. Ben didn't reply. Martin extended a business card. If you would be so kind, I'd like to arrange for it to be returned. You may, of course, deliver it in person. Miss Elena specifically requested that, if possible. Ben took the card, reading the address. Burlington. Something stirred in him. Unease, curiosity, maybe even the early flicker of something more dangerous. Hope. I'll think about it, he said. Martin nodded once. Please do. And Mr. Carter, thank you. Not everyone would have done what you did. As the car disappeared down the road, Ben stood for a long time in the cold, the card in one hand, the key in the other. What had he just stepped into? And who, really, was the woman at the bus? Stop. Ben stared at the business card on the kitchen table, like it might change if he waited long enough. It didn't. The embossed print read, Martin Graves, personal counsel to the Sutter estate, and below it, a Burlington address that seemed more like a myth than a destination. The card was pristine, expensive, the kind of thing that didn't belong in a house with creaky floors and mismatched chairs. Neither did the key, still sitting where he'd left it 2 nights ago beside the salt shaker as if it were just another item on the dinner table. Noah sat across from him now, pushing cereal around in his bowl. The morning sun struggled through. The cloudy window casting pale light over the kitchen. Are you going to give it back? Noah asked, eyes curious but careful. Ben leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his jaw. I don't know yet. Why not? It's not that. Simple. To me it is. Ben gave a tired smile. That's because you're 8. Noah grinned, but then turned serious again. If Mom left something behind, wouldn't you want someone to bring it back? Ben swallowed hard. The boy had a way of cutting through things without realizing the depth of what he'd just said. Or maybe he did. Yeah, Ben said softly. I would. By noon, the key was in his pocket, and the truck was warming up in the driveway. Ben had spent the morning going back and forth in his mind, weighing logic against instinct, past wounds against present curiosity. But in the end, the simplest truth won. Eleanor deserved her key back, and maybe, just maybe, he needed to know who she really was. The road to Burlington cut through miles of snow-covered hills and frozen lakes. It wasn't a short drive, and with Westvale's ancient heater groaning, the truck took longer than it should have. But Ben didn't mind the quiet. He thought about the Sutter name, the way Mrs. Halley had said it, like it carried weight. He thought about Martin Graves, too, how the man had spoken with polished words, but watched with eyes that missed nothing. Most of all, he thought about Elena. Who was she really? Burlington shimmered beneath a layer of frost, elegant and distant. Ben had been here only once before, years ago, when he and Lena had taken a weekend trip to the lake before Noah was born. Now, it felt like a different world entirely. The address on the card led him through tree-lined streets to a narrow gate, flanked by stone pillars. A guardhouse stood beside it, discreet but unmistakable. When Ben pulled up, a uniformed attendant approached his window. Name? Ben Carter. The guard checked a tablet, nodded once, and stepped back. The gate opened with a smooth, silent motion. He followed a winding drive through old oaks until a manor came into view. 3 stories of quiet grandeur, slate-roofed and ivy-draped, standing like it had always been there and always would be. Ben parked beside a sleek black Audi and stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. The wind here smelled like pine and old money. The front door opened before he reached it. Martin stood there, expression unchanged. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming." Ben nodded, reaching into his coat and pulling out the key. "Figured this should get back to its owner." Martin didn't take it. "She's waiting for you." Inside. The hallway smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil. Paintings lined the walls, landscapes, portraits, each one more expensive than the last. A fire crackled softly somewhere in the distance. The whole place felt like a museum someone happened to live in. Martin led him to a sunroom at the rear of the house. Glass panes stretched from floor to ceiling, overlooking a frozen garden blanketed in snow. In the center of the room sat Elena. She stood when he entered. Her coat was gone, replaced by a soft grey sweater. Her hair was loose, her expression open, but slightly guarded, like someone unsure if she was about to receive a gift or a blow. "Ben," she said. "Elena." There was a pause, long enough to feel like the moment held weight. Neither of them quite understood. He stepped forward and handed her the key. "I think this is yours." She took it slowly, eyes dropping to the brass, fingers curling around it like it was something fragile. "I didn't realize it was gone until the next day," she said. "I looked everywhere. I even thought I might have imagined leaving it. I figured it fell out while I was fixing your suitcase." "It must have," she said softly, and then looked up at him. "But I think maybe it was supposed to." Ben tilted his head. "Why's that?" She gave a small smile. "Because if it hadn't, I wouldn't have had a reason to find you again." They sat together in silence for a while. Outside, snow danced along the window panes. Ben finally spoke. "You didn't tell me who you were." "I didn't think it mattered." "You're a Sutter," she nodded. "My father passed 2 months ago. This house, the estate, the foundation, it's all mine now. Not by choice, exactly." "And the key?" "It opens a private vault," she said. "He called it the heart of the house. Documents, letters, personal things. He didn't want lawyers going through it. He said us one day, the right person will put this in your hands." Ben frowned. "And you think I'm the right person?" She smiled. "I don't know yet. But I know you're the kind of man who helps someone without asking for anything. In return, that's rare." Ben looked away. Compliments were harder to accept than keys. Before he left, she walked him to the door. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Why did you help me that day? You didn't even know me." Ben hesitated, then shrugged. "Because you looked like you needed someone to slow down for a minute, and because someone once did that for me, a long time ago." She watched him for a beat, then nodded. "Well, I'm glad it was you." He smiled, and for a moment it felt easy, natural. "I should get back. My son's waiting." Her eyes softened. "He's lucky to have you." Ben opened the door, stepped into the cold. The sky had turned a lighter grey, like the storm had passed. So had something else. On the drive back, Ben felt the key's absence in his pocket like a phantom limb. But something else had taken its place. A question he hadn't allowed himself in years. What if life wasn't done surprising him? 3 days after the visit to the Sutter estate, Ben Carter was back under the hood of a '97 Ford with a cracked radiator and the kind of rust that felt personal. The radio in the garage sputtered old country tunes, and the scent of motor oil clung to the air like memory, but even as he worked, his thoughts were far from Westvale. He kept hearing Elena's voice. He called it the heart of the house, and that key, small, elegant, and now returned, had somehow unlocked more than a vault. It had opened a door inside him he didn't know was still closed. Since coming back from Burlington, he'd been restless, not in the way grief used to make him, tired and lost, but in a different, quieter way, as if something had shifted beneath his feet, and he wasn't sure if it was solid ground or the start of a new road. That afternoon, while Noah worked on a school project about winter wildlife, Ben sat by the kitchen window, a mug of cooling coffee in his hands. Snow drifted past, the glass slow and steady. The world was still until the letter came. He almost didn't see it, buried between a heating bill and a flyer for discounted snow tires. But the envelope was crisp, cream-colored, and bore the unmistakable insignia of the Sutter Foundation. Ben tore it open cautiously. Inside was a handwritten note in elegant script, Elena's handwriting, along with an embossed invitation. Ben, thank you again for returning the key. You didn't just help me. You helped preserve something deeply personal. I've been reading through the vault's contents these past few days, and I found something I think you should see. My father had a file marked with your name. If you're willing, I'd like to show it to you. Ben read the note twice. A file. With his name. He wasn't sure what unsettled him more. The fact that the Sutter patriarch knew who he was, or the question that immediately followed, why? The next morning, he left Noah with their neighbor Marlene, who was more than happy to watch cartoons and bake cookies with her favorite honorary grandson. Then he hit the road. The sky was overcast. Again, Vermont's eternal winter palette, but the miles passed quickly. By the time the gates of the estate came into view, he was no longer thinking about roads or snow. He was thinking about the man behind the Sutter name and why a working-class mechanic from a nowhere town could possibly matter to a family that lived in stone manors and had vaults full of secrets. Elena greeted him at the door with a soft smile. She wore a thick-knit sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back this time, no trace of city polish or guarded distance. "I didn't think you'd come," she admitted, as she led him down the hall. "Neither did I," Ben said honestly. She guided him through the house until they reached a small library off the main hallway. The room was warm and quiet, lined with shelves that reached the ceiling. A fire burned low in the hearth, and on a leather-topped desk near the window sat a thin folder. His name was typed across the front in block letters, Carter. Benjamin L. Ben stared at it for a long moment. "I found it 2 nights ago," Eleanor said. "It was in the back of the vault, with personal correspondences and handwritten memos. I didn't recognize the name at first, but then—" He nodded slowly and reached for the folder. Inside were 3 pages. The first was a resume, his resume, the one he'd submitted over a decade ago when he'd applied for a mechanical internship with a high-performance auto restoration company in Chicago. The one he'd never heard back from. He blinked. "I forgot I even sent this." Elena looked down at the papers. "My father didn't. He kept notes on everyone he believed had something rare. Not pedigree, not connections. Something better. Craft, instinct, integrity." Ben flipped to the second page, a handwritten memo in neat cursive, promising candidate, military precision in wiring. Hand-restored an engine block at 19, work ethic strong, rural, humble, one to watch, if ever needed. Ben stared at the words, a strange heaviness settling in his chest. The final page was a photograph. It was of him, standing outside his garage. In West Vale, arms crossed, the old Mustang in the background. The photo was recent. It hadn't come from an application. Someone had taken it deliberately. He looked at Elena, stunned. "My father never told me why he kept tabs on certain people," she said. "But he believed in quiet impact, in people who fixed things, not for applause, but because it was the right thing to do." Ben's throat was dry. "So, what, he just kept me on some kind of list?" She nodded. "He didn't always act on it, but sometimes when he saw someone helping without asking for anything, he made sure they didn't get left behind." Ben looked back at the folder. "I don't know whether to be honored or creeped out." Eleanor smiled gently. "A little of both is probably fair." They sat in silence for a moment. Then she added, "But I think he would have liked you. Actually, I think he already did." Later, they walked through the garden paths behind the estate, boots crunching on icy gravel. The sun peeked through for the first time in days, laying soft gold over the snow. "So what now?" Ben asked. Elena glanced at him. "That's up to you." He raised an eyebrow. "I have access now," she said, "to the foundation, to the programs my father funded, grants for tradespeople, community workshops, small-town revitalizations. He left me the keys, literally and figuratively, and I've been thinking about who deserves to use them." Ben stopped walking. "You're not offering me charity, are you?" "No," she said, "I'm offering you a choice." She paused, meeting his eyes. "You could stay where you are, scraping by, doing good work no one sees. Or you could let me help you expand Noah's Garage, hire people, train people, reach more than just a couple busted snowblowers a week." He studied her face, searching for motive, for strings. "I don't want to owe anyone," he said quietly. "You don't, she replied. "But maybe, just maybe, you're owed something already, for being the kind of man who stops on the side of the road for a stranger in the snow." That night, driving back through the mountains, the folder sat beside him on the passenger seat. The fire in his chest was different this time. Not grief, not longing. It was possibility. Maybe it was time to stop surviving and start choosing. And maybe the first choice was letting someone in. Snow fell in slow spirals as Ben Carter pulled up to the Sutter estate once again, his truck a tired outsider among the sleek sedans dotting the curved driveway. This time he didn't hesitate at the gate. He gave his name, and the attendant waved him through like he belonged. He still wasn't sure if he did. The house looked the same, grand, impossibly quiet, timeless. But something in Ben felt different this time. He wasn't here out of obligation anymore. He was here because a part of him, one he thought had long since gone cold, was stirring. Elena met him at the front door, cheeks flushed from the cold, her hair tucked beneath a wool beret. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said, her eyes catching his for a beat longer than necessary. Ben offered a modest shrug. "I've learned not to ignore open doors." A smile curved at the corners of her mouth, and she stepped aside to let him in. They walked through the hallways without the stiffness of strangers this time. The house, though still quiet, no longer felt like a museum. It felt like a story still, being written. "Elena," he said as they reached the old wing where the vault was housed, "that file, why do you think your father kept it? Why not reach out, offer something while he was still alive?" She paused in front of the heavy oak door, one hand resting on the iron latch. "My father didn't believe in handouts," she said. "He believed in moments, in timing. He once told me, 'Some people you don't pull out of the mud. You wait until they've taken one step themselves. Then you show them where the road begins.'" Ben nodded, thoughtful. "That sounds familiar." She pushed the door open. The room was part library, part archive, part something else entirely, a personal time capsule. Dust filtered through shafts of light from narrow, arched windows. Wooden cabinets lined the walls, and in the center sat a large table with an assortment of items neatly arranged. Letters, photographs, leather-bound notebooks, a faded map of Vermont, and a small black box that hadn't been there on Ben's. Last visit, Elena walked straight to it. "I didn't open this until yesterday," she said, lifting the lid gently. "I thought it was just another box of financial records, but it wasn't." Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with a red ribbon, an old Polaroid, and a small pendant, simple, silver, shaped like a gear. Ben leaned closer. "What's that?" She picked up the pendant and turned it over. On the back, a single word was engraved in tiny cursive: "Mechanic." "My father wore this for years," she said, "but I never knew why. He told people it was a token from a simpler time, But I think it meant more. She handed it to Ben without explanation. He turned it in his hand, frowning. You think this is connected to me? I think, she said slowly, that my father once had a mechanic help him the way you helped me. Before all of this, before the foundation, before the estate, he was just a man trying to rebuild something, and someone showed up for him. I think you reminded him of that. Ben was quiet. The pendant felt cool and strange in his hand, like it carried weight from another life. She reached for the bundle of letters next, untying the ribbon. The top envelope was addressed to her in her father's handwriting. She opened it, eyes scanning quickly. Her lips parted slightly. "What is it?" Ben asked. She handed him the second page, a short paragraph scribbled in ink that had faded but not lost its urgency. "If you're reading this, it means you found the right person. People like him are rare. He fixes what others throw away. Don't offer him money, offer him purpose. If he says no, let him, but leave the door open. He'll find it again when he's ready." Ben stared at the words, unmoving. They weren't flowery or grand. They were clear, intentional. He swallowed hard. "He didn't even know me." Elena's voice was quiet. He knew what mattered. They sat by the fire in the adjoining reading room after that, silence settling between them like snow. Ben cradled a cup of tea he hadn't touched. Elena curled her legs beneath her, holding her own cup with both hands. "You said once," he began, "that you didn't choose this life, the estate, the foundation. Do you want it?" She stared into the fire, flames flickering across her eyes. "For a long time I didn't. I ran from it, lived in London, then Paris. I thought if I kept moving I could outrun the expectations. And now," she turned to him, "now I think I want to do something good with it. Something real, but not alone." Ben raised an eyebrow. "You offering me a job?" "Not a job," she said, "a partnership. Help me build something that matters, not in a city boardroom, on the ground, in towns like Westvale, with people who don't ask for help, but need it all the same." He didn't answer right away. The fire cracked. Wind whispered against the windows. Finally he said, "You're asking me to believe in a legacy that wasn't mine." "No," she said softly. "I'm asking you to build one that is." Ben drove home under a sky full of stars. The storm had passed, leaving everything crisp and clear. The roads were quiet. The truck's headlights cut through the dark, and in the seat beside him sat the gear-shaped pendant. He touched it once, then looked at the road ahead. Back in Westvale, the garage was dark. But when he pulled into the driveway, he saw a light still on in Noah's bedroom window. He climbed out quietly and stepped into the house. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon, Marlene's doing, no doubt, and a note sat on the counter. In Noah's handwriting, "Dad, I fixed the Lego truck. It finally rolls straight." Ben smiled, setting the pendant next to the note. He walked into the garage, flicked on the light, and stared at the Mustang in the corner. It wasn't finished. Not even close, but he was ready to start again. The first snowmelt came slowly, reluctant and patchy, revealing frozen soil and damp leaves beneath the drifts. In Westvale, winter never left all at once. It receded like grief, bit by bit, leaving behind the quiet wreckage of what had been buried. Ben Carter stood in the doorway of Noah's garage, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug. Morning light spilled through the high window panes, glinting off tools and half-finished projects. The old Mustang rested in the corner, its hood propped up, a symbol of something he was trying to finish not just for Lena, but maybe now also, and for himself. The visit to the Sutter estate had done more than stir his curiosity. It had opened a door inside him that had been bolted shut for years. He could feel it every time he thought of Elena's offer, of her father's strange but deliberate belief in him. It both humbled and unsettled him, and yet something in him resisted. There was a weight he still carried, something heavy and quiet and unfinished. That afternoon, he took Noah sledding down at the old high school hill, one of the last places where snow still held fast. They laughed, tumbled and raced, their breath visible against the sky, the kind of joy that belonged to simple things. But even as Ben smiled, something gnawed at the edges. Later, back home, Noah colored at the kitchen table while Ben stood at the sink washing dishes that didn't really need it. "Hey, Dad," Noah said without looking up. "Yeah? If you take that job with Miss Elena, does that mean we move?" Ben turned off the faucet. "Who said anything about a job?" "You've been thinking about it," Noah replied, still coloring. "You get that face when you're thinking hard." Ben smiled faintly. "That obvious, huh?" Noah nodded, and then, more quietly, "I think Mom would want you to be happy." The words landed with more force than the boy could have known. Ben gripped the edge of the sink. "She would," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Noah looked up now, eyes wide. "Do you still miss her a lot?" Ben sat down across from him. "Every day." "Me too." They sat there, the silence not empty, but full, shared, understood. Then Noah asked, "Do you think it's okay to start something new, even if you're still sad sometimes?" Ben blinked. He hadn't expected wisdom to come in a child's voice today. "I think," he said slowly, "that being sad and starting over might go together more than we realize." That night, after Noah fell asleep, with the book still open on his chest, Ben went out to the garage. He didn't turn on the overhead light, just the old desk lamp on the workbench. The Mustang loomed in the shadows. He walked to the corner shelf and opened the small wooden box where he kept the things he couldn't throw away. Inside was Lena's wedding ring, worn down but still glowing in soft gold. A folded note she'd once left in his lunchbox. "Fix the world, one bolt at a time." Her handwriting, loopy and bold. A dried daisy from the summer Noah was born. A photograph of the three of them. Noah, just a baby, nestled between two smiling parents who still believed time was theirs to spend. Ben sat down slowly. He had spent so long carrying grief like a badge, like proof that he'd loved deeply and lost deeply too. He had kept it close, like a promise not to forget. But lately, it had started to feel like something else. Not a promise, a barrier. He stared at Lena's ring for a long time. Then, quietly, he slipped it off the chain around his neck and set it in the box. He closed the lid, not to forget, but to let go. 2 days later, Elena showed up in Westvale, unannounced. Ben had just finished changing brake pads on a local delivery truck when he saw her standing at the edge of the lot, arms crossed, cheeks pink. From the cold, a hesitant smile on her face. He wiped his hands on a rag and approached. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I needed a break from the estate," she said, "and I needed to see this place." Ben glanced back at the garage. "It's not much." She looked at him like she was seeing more than just bricks and beams. "That's not true." He gestured for her to follow him inside. The garage was warm, with the scent of motor oil and melting snow. A radio hummed quietly in the corner. Tools hung with precise order, and in the corner the Mustang waited like a story still unfolding. "I wanted to see where you fix things," she said, running her fingers along the edge of the workbench. "You've built something here, something real." He studied her for a moment. "And what are you building, Elena?" She paused. "I'm not sure yet, but I know I don't want to do it alone." He didn't answer. So she said the quiet part aloud. "You're still afraid?" Ben nodded slowly. "I've spent years afraid of moving forward because I thought it meant leaving her behind. Like if I smiled too much, laughed too hard, looked forward too far, I'd lose her all over again." Elena stepped closer. "You don't have to stop missing her to make space for something new. You just have to stop making grief the only room you live in." The words weren't sharp. They were soft, gentle, but they landed deep. Ben looked down. Then finally, he met her eyes. And what if I don't know how to do that? She smiled. Then maybe we figure it out together. That night, the three of them, Ben, Elena, and Noah, sat around a small fire pit behind the garage. Noah roasted marshmallows with intense concentration. Ben sipped cider from an old camping mug. Elena leaned back in her chair, looking up at the stars. It wasn't grand, it wasn't dramatic, but it was something new. And for the first time in years, Ben didn't feel like he was betraying the past by being present in the now. He looked at Elena, her face glowing in the firelight, and he didn't look away. The snow had melted, but the chill remained. That soft, lingering cold of early spring, the kind that made you unzip your jacket at noon and regret it by 5. Ben Carter stood at the threshold of Noah's garage, staring at the sign he'd hand-painted. Years ago, the green paint had faded, the edges worn by seasons and sun, but the name still held. Noah's Garage. Not because he thought it was catchy, not even because he planned to pass it down. It was a reminder of who he was doing it for, of why he stayed. But lately something had shifted. The garage no longer felt like the end of his story. It felt like the beginning of something else, a chapter he hadn't planned, hadn't dared to imagine. And now, a decision waited. Inside, a crisp folder sat on his workbench, freshly delivered. By courier that morning. A proposal. Elena had typed it herself, though the Foundation's board would formalize the offer. A full renovation and expansion of Noah's Garage, transforming it into a vocational center for underserved youth in rural towns. A training program, a paid apprenticeship network, scholarships for skilled trades. They wanted Ben at the helm, not as a mascot, but as a partner. He picked up the folder, flipped through the pages again. The numbers were generous, more than generous. He'd never seen this many zeros in a document with his name on it. It terrified him, because it wasn't just an offer. It was a challenge. Do you believe you're worthy of this? Are you ready to stop hiding behind what you lost and build something that might last? Ben set the folder down and exhaled. That evening, he took Noah to their favorite fishing spot, just outside town. The lake was still mostly frozen, but the banks had begun to soften, and patches of earth peeked through the snow like shy children. They sat on the tailgate of the truck, sharing a thermos of hot chocolate and a sleeve of graham. "Crackers! I got offered something big," Ben said after a while. Noah looked up. "Like garage big? Bigger. How big?" Ben smiled. "Big enough to change things. For us. For other people, too." Noah was quiet for a moment, nibbling on a cracker. "Would we still live here? Maybe. Maybe we'd travel. A bit. Help open other places like ours. Work with other kids who need someone to teach them, to believe in them." Noah nodded, slow and thoughtful. "Would I still go to school?" "Of course." "Would you still fix things?" Ben chuckled. "Always." Noah leaned against his side. "Then I think you should do it." Ben turned to him. "You're not afraid of change?" Noah shrugged. "Not really. We already did the hard part, right?" Ben swallowed hard. "What part's that?" "Losing Mom." The words hit like a quiet punch, but the boy's voice wasn't sad, just honest, steady. "After that," Noah added, "everything else feels like stuff we can figure out." Ben wrapped an arm around his son and pulled him close. "You're a wise little man," Noah grinned. "I know." Back at the house, Ben sat by the kitchen table long after Noah had gone to bed, the proposal folder open beside a cooling mug of tea. The pendant Elena had given him, the one her father once wore, lay next to it, glinting softly in the light. He picked it up, tracing the engraving on the back. Mechanic, not a title. Not really a calling. Not to fix things that were broken, but to believe they were worth fixing in the first place. The next morning, Ben drove to Burlington. Elena met him on the steps of the Foundation's annex office, a modern, understated, building nestled among old brick and cherry trees just beginning to bud. She looked nervous, though she tried to hide it. He walked up to her, folder in hand. "I read every word," he said. "And?" she asked, her voice too casual to be casual. "I'm not sure you realize what you're asking. I'm asking you to believe in what you already do, every day." "And I'm telling you," Ben said, "I've spent the last few years convincing myself I wasn't meant for anything bigger than patching up rusted trucks and keeping the lights on." Elena's face fell slightly, just a flicker. But then Ben stepped closer and handed her the signed contract. "I was wrong." She looked at him, blinking. "You're saying yes?" He nodded. "I'm saying yes, but not just to the job." Something shifted in her eyes, guardedness giving way to something warmer. "Then what else are you saying yes to?" He didn't answer with words, not right away. Instead, he reached for her hand. She took it. There, in the crisp Vermont morning, between a life he'd known and the one still being built, Ben made his choice. He wasn't betraying Lena by moving forward. He was honoring her, because she had loved the part of him that believed in fixing things, especially himself. That night back in Westvale, Ben closed the garage early. He and Noah picked up pizza from the corner store and ate it on the living room floor, surrounded by plans and blueprints and boxes of crayons. Ben pointed at a sketch of the new shop layout. "That's going to be the new lift bay." Noah, chewing, thoughtfully asked, "Can we put a snack machine in the waiting room?" Ben laughed. "I'll make it the first purchase." Noah leaned back against the couch cushions, a look of contentment on his face. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy." "I'm glad you said yes." Ben looked at him, really looked, and smiled. "Me too." Spring arrived in Westvale not with fanfare, but with gentle insistence, melting snow in quiet corners, early blooms defying frost, and the sound of robins daring to sing again. It was the kind of season that didn't declare itself, just unfolded, like healing or forgiveness. The grand reopening of Noah's garage was scheduled for Saturday, but the work had already begun weeks before. The old structure still stood. Ben had insisted on that. "We don't erase what held us up," he'd said. "We just build around it," so they had. With Elena's guidance and the foundation's support, the once humble garage had transformed into something bigger, a vocational training space, a mentoring hub, a second chance for kids like Ben had once been. Still rustic, still honest. But now, with fresh paint, clean lifts, new tools, and space that echoed with more than just clanging metal, it echoed with hope. Ben stood on the front porch of the garage that morning, mug in hand, staring at the new sign overhead. The same name still hung there, Noah's Garage, but beneath it smaller letters had been added. A Sutter Foundation initiative, built for the fixers. He smiled at that. Behind him, inside the building, a small crowd of people from town had already started to gather. Neighbors, friends, a few reporters from Burlington. Even Rick, his old friend, had shown up in a blazer and jeans, pretending not to be impressed. Ben didn't care about the attention. He cared about what it meant. He cared about the two teenagers in the corner learning how to replace brake pads. About the mother who pulled him aside with tears in her eyes, thanking him for giving her son a reason to wake up early. About the way Noah beamed every time someone asked if the place was named after him, and he cared about the woman walking toward him now, hair swept up, cheeks rosy from the breeze. Elena. She joined him on the porch, her arm brushing his lightly. "You ready?" Ben took a deep breath, glancing once more at the crowd, the building, the mountain-lined sky. "I think I've been ready longer than I realized." She smiled. "It shows." The ribbon-cutting was simple. No big speeches, just a few words from Ben, short and quiet, the way he always spoke when it mattered most. "This garage started as a way to survive," he said. "Now it's a way to give others a place to start. Not perfect, not fancy, but honest. We fix things here. Cars, sure, but also confidence, purpose, maybe even a few broken hearts if we're lucky. People clapped. A few wiped their eyes. Noah was the one who cut the ribbon, hands trembling slightly with the oversized scissors. Ben knelt beside him, whispered, "Nice and slow, like pulling a good bolt, steady and straight." Noah nodded. The ribbon snapped. Applause broke out. The day passed in a flurry of tours, laughter, hot cider, and the scent of baked goods someone had brought from the church. Ben moved through it all with the kind of grace that came not from comfort, but from belonging. Late in the afternoon, as the crowd thinned and the sky turned honey gold, Ben found himself alone near the workbench, the same one where he'd once stared at a key that didn't belong to him. Now, in its place, sat a new plaque carved in oak for those who fix more than what's broken, and for those brave enough to begin again. Ben ran a hand over the words, heart full. Behind him, he heard soft footsteps. "You did it," Elena said. "We did it," she smiled. "Your name's already coming up in board meetings. They're calling you the Fixer from Westvale." Ben laughed. "Sounds like a country song." "No," she said. "Sounds like the beginning of something good." That evening, after the last guest had gone, Ben and Eleanor walked down to the lake where the ice had finally receded and the water shimmered like glass. Noah skipped stones across the surface, his laughter echoing across the stillness. Elena tucked her arm into Ben's. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day? If you hadn't fixed my suitcase?" "All the time." And Ben looked at her, then at Noah, then at the horizon. "I wouldn't have found this, any of this." He paused. "And maybe I wouldn't have found myself either." Elena leaned, her head on his shoulder. They stood that way for a while, three people shaped by grief, by chance, by choices made in quiet moments. Not perfect, not whole in the way they once were, but healing together. Later that night, Ben tucked Noah into bed. The boy looked up sleepily and asked, "Do you think Mom saw the garage today?" Ben's throat caught for a second. Then he nodded. "Yeah, I think she was there the whole time." Noah smiled. "I thought so too." Ben kissed his forehead. "Good night, buddy." As he turned out the light and stepped into the hallway, Elena was waiting. She held out her hand. He took it, not because he needed saving, but because sometimes even the strongest fixers need someone to walk beside them on the new road. And for the first time in a long time, Ben Carter wasn't afraid of where it might lead. If you'd like, I can now help prepare this for publication, narration, or YouTube storytelling format. Just let me know your next goal. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments. We're always amazed by how far these stories travel. If this story touched your heart and you enjoy content that inspires hope, healing, and second chances, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We post new stories regularly, and we'd be honored to have you as part of this growing, heartfelt community. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep believing in the goodness that still exists in this world.